Yo, yo, yo. What's good? What's good? It's Stormy B Man, and I am back. Welcoming you to Stormy B Man Reacts. This is another one of my independent joints under the Nerds on Culture banner, where I get a chance to talk about my beloved affinity for the comic book film and graphic films based on our comic book characters that we have admired and followed for over 80 years. Listen, recently there was an interview by a content creator who has a YouTube channel. The gentleman's name is Josh Horowitz. And he has been known to interview celebrities, people who are in the business of filmmaking. And he recently had an interview where it was conducted with former WB director Zack Snyder. It was right around the time of Snyder's birthday, who just turned, I think he just turned 60 years old. And it's also I think they said it was the 10th anniversary for BVS, Batman versus Superman. Now, I've been a follower of the material that Zack Snyder has done and have found it very entertaining. His visuals are outstanding. And I was quite disappointed, as so many others were, when he had to step away from his project of the Justice League due to family matters. And I had always hoped that he could return and finish out what he has started. But as fate would step in, things deteriorated with Warner Brothers Studios as well as DC and what they were doing, the directions that they wanted to head into. Now, in the interim, former Marvel director and writer, producer James Gunn had found himself acquiring the opportunity to become a CEO over at DC Warner Brothers. I did a reaction video to that. James Gunn had outlined plans that he had said would maybe cover the scope of the next 10 years for DC and Warner Brothers. Characters like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman would return, but surrounded by a lot of fare that people weren't familiar with, such as Peacemaker, and Creature Commandos, shows like that. not what the people really wanted. And I had questioned what was going to happen with those efforts by James Gunn. Fast forward a bit, and in 2025, due to the pressure, he released his Superman film. And though he had told people early on he had no interest in doing a Superman film, writing one, or whatever, he was doing all of that behind the scenes, including not rehiring the beloved Superman that many people had grown to show a lot of interest in, and that was Henry Cavill's portrayal of the character. Josh Horowitz had a chance to catch up with Zack Snyder, and they had a great conversation. I'll provide the link to that in the description box, but I want to go back and review a bit of their conversation and what they spoke on, because now that Warner Brothers and DC have been purchased by Paramount, it's looking like there may be an opportunity for Zack to return and finish some projects that he had envisioned. One of them would be the Dark Knight Returns story that he would like to bring about in live action. For anyone that saw his version of BVS, the ultimate cut and everything, you would know that just by watching that film alone, Zack has a huge affinity and love for Batman. I remember sitting in the theater watching the film for the first time, and as it was going through the paces, I was saying to myself, this man really loves Batman. And it was just, the movie wasn't even halfway through, but I could tell the way that he presented Batman, how Batman was active, he was highly intelligent, he was a physical man, and he was scary in a sense that vigilantes can be. Zack was able to capture all of that, plus a little bit of the humanity of Bruce Wayne. And I was very impressed. I was like, wow. So much to the degree that I thought he took a lot away from Superman in the film BVS, but it was still a job well done. So if he's going to return and bring that character back, and I'm certain he would love to have Ben Affleck back as Batman, because as you'll see in this interview, when he states about the character and how he came up with the idea of Ben becoming Bruce, it's quite impressive. Snyder is also an artist by natural talent. I guess he went to school for his artwork and everything, but he has been known when he's produced his films that he draws out the film on storyboards, and he can actually tell the tale of how he wants to present a film from camera angles, how they're taken and so forth. He has given this information up in behind the scenes special feature segments on some of his released fare, but the passion that the man has for producing these characters, bringing them to life, and also having a creative process behind it that is kind of like no other. Had Warner Brothers allowed this gentleman to go ahead and finish what he was trying to do, I truly believe they would have caught up to Marvel, at least in the sense of the quality of what they were churning out. People are going to like what they like. People will like dramatic things. They will like comedic things. But DC and Marvel have always been a little bit different in the tones to begin with. And some people, though they felt that what Zack was presenting was much darker, they failed to realize that Christopher Nolan was a part of this, and though he had his Dark Knight trilogy, which was not a part of this universe that they were restarting with Man of Steel, he wanted things grounded and more realistic. So the alien aspect of Clark/Cal, it was some drums that they were able to beat up to the people to give a different perspective and turn with Superman, and I enjoyed that as well. But here we'll get into this, and I'll give a little bit of my reactions to the interview with Zack Snyder with Josh Horowitz, and hopefully you'll enjoy what you're hearing from the interview and my take and what I have to say about how I find the interview going. So with no further ado, here's Zack Snyder being interviewed by Josh Horowitz. Let's take a listen.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have Zack Snyder on Happy, Sad, and Confused, but especially today, Zack, we are celebrating 10 years have gone by in a flash. We're looking back at Batman v Superman. Welcome back to the pod, and congratulations on 10 years, man. Good to see you.
Oh, wow. I know it's crazy, right? 10 years. How did that happen?
How did it happen?
Unbelievable. It's exciting, but thanks for having me. This is fun.
Of course, I love this kind of thing. This is also, by the way, I was noticing today, I got a few emails noting that I think today or this week is the 40th anniversary of The Dark Knight Returns. So this is like, it's all coming together.
It's all perfect. Yeah, no, it's a very, I guess right around March, which is my birthday. We had this tradition of, I think it literally got set, maybe it was on Dawn of the Dead? I don't remember, but for sure on 300. And we did these March releases.
Right.
And before that wasn't a date. People would be like, you can't release a movie in March, or no movies do well in March. And then after 300, we were just like, March is our date, let's go.
Totally.
So I have a few movies that released in March.
Before we get into this movie in particular, I mean, Dark Knight Returns is obviously such an important marker for you. It influences this film in a huge way. Doing the math, when that comic came out, that graphic novel came out, you must have been about 20, I assume, in school. Do you remember when Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns came out and what it did for you?
Yeah, I remember well because it was, we were pretty much in the Watchmen Dark Knight era had really struck pop culture and I guess the comic book community, more specifically, of course, but for me as, on that sort of quest to find the thing that would spark my imagination. And, when you're at that age, you're just sort of right into college and you're just kind of looking at storytelling, if you're like a junkie for visuals like I am, something so rare, the air with those things combine, like these striking images with, this story that is mythological. And, I think the funny thing about comic books is that, people, they talk about, Greek mythology, certain mythologies, and everyone's like, oh, that's really cool. I can kind of relate to it. The thing about comic book mythology is so personal, you know what I mean, to someone who likes comic books, that I think, Dark Knight Returns, for me anyway, was like, it felt like it was written specifically for me. And it, with mythology in general, whatever, when you're looking at ancient mythology, you really feel like you're just joining a giant river that you're flowing into yourself, and you're like sort of in, you're looking around, it's a pretty wide river, but it's like you're going with the flow, it feels awesome, it's like very natural. Where I feel like The Dark Knight Returns is like someone wrote your myth, and specifically that was amazing. You have this seminal comic book that really profoundly affects you, but with no way of expressing it. You know what I mean? There's no, at that point in my life, there was no Batman fighting Superman movie that you could possibly, in my wildest dreams, could be a reality, right? So,
You know, you can just hear the enthusiasm in his voice as he explains how he was taken with the particular character and writing of The Dark Knight Returns. And he carried that torch for that project with him. And when the opportunity came, now you understand why BVS was so Batman heavy and central. And Zack was able to put that passion into not only the character, but the story. You need that from someone who's going to be producing the fair to show to an audience, because the audience can read and pick up on that. We've seen the camp of superheroes and we've seen the comedy with superheroes, but we had never really seen the drama of the superheroes with the action and some parts of violence, but at the same time, something that makes you root for the anti-hero like a Batman. And all of that comes through, even as he's explaining why this project was so important to him. What I like to do is skip around in this interview a bit because he is dropping some gems, but it is great to hear from the man himself why, he says what he says and he feels like he feels. But I'll first allow him to finish up with what he's saying about The Dark Knight Returns.
okay. It lay dormant in my, I had it, it was on my coffee table, on my desk, wherever I was, I had it. And so, listen, I'll be 100% honest, I would still make The Dark Knight Returns as a film if that opportunity arose. Because to me, it's like did I steal or borrow or homage, I guess, as much as I could within the context of the mythology that I was creating? Yes. But the thing about Dark Knight Returns is it is a closed loop of like awesomeness that owes nothing to anything except for a masterful deconstruction of gods that we all grew up with. And I think that and really you see that in BVS. BVS is, for me, damn the like what the world would think. I was bound and determined to challenge my gods and find out if they could handle it.
That's great stuff, man. It's great stuff because here you can see where he's looking at the fact that how people are going to receive it. He's looking at the fact that though you may follow and have followed the graphics, are you prepared for someone to really present it to you in the rawness that it would take as live action? And boy, was he able to do it. I often have had conversations with people speaking on BVS, and the warehouse scene always comes up in conversation where they say, man, that was Batman. I've never seen Batman portrayed on film like that. And it was really enthralling. It was something that was captivating. I can recall during the battle scene where Batman is taking on all of these subjects, and there's a moment when he's like on the ground and one of them gets close and he stabs Batman in the shoulder. And Batman's like, ah. And then they're wrestling around. He knocks the guy back into a wall. Then he goes after the other dudes and he takes everyone out. But he saved that guy who stabbed him for last. And as the guy was pinned near the wall where Batman had left him purposely, Batman, after finishing off the others, slowly walks up to him with this look of destruction on his character. And as the guy is against the wall and he's kind of writhing in pain, Batman just kind of gives it to him right there. It's a personal shot and a personalized message being sent. And that's when I was like, whoa, man, this dude is not to be messed with. You see what I'm saying? And it was great because Zack Snyder was able to pull that out. Now, Christopher Nolan's Batman was good. Christian Bale was excellent as an actor, but he was in a more realistic world, and there were subtleties that made him more real world like. But Zack not only captured some of that, but he brought the pages of the graphic to life. And that's kind of hard to do. Visually, emotionally, just to have an overall feel for what you're witnessing. And that's what I really enjoyed about what I was seeing with BVS. We're going to go up a little bit where they begin to have a conversation about the reception for BVS.
Surprise you? Give me something.
And also, like, if you it is whatever $890 million, whatever it is, unadjusted. Like, if you do any kind of inflationary adjustment for that movie, it's like really, really exactly $1 billion movie. So it is in retrospect. I mean, listen. This is also, I think, this movie also was the birth, in a lot of ways, for the general public, I think, more of the director cut concept for as it pertains to my films and the way I make movies. Because no director's cut for Man of Steel just wasn't that kind of movie. Very, like, we just went straight ahead. Watchmen, of course, I think famously has 2 director's cuts. And because, a lot of what was dictating the length of those movies was IMAX. Because IMAX, at the time, the film palettes were a certain size, and the movie could only be, I think, 2 hours and 28 minutes or 2 hours and whatever Watchmen is, the theatrical release of Watchmen was that they had told me if the room was humid, the film would fall off, right? Because the moisture of the film laying against the other piece of film, if it was as moist, it wouldn't be as tight, and so the film would fall off. So that's literally like, and so there was a lot of stuff that, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my IMAX release. And so there was a lot of stuff that I wanted in Watchmen because I was such a fanatic for the material. And I think, and so the BBS, the director's cut of BBS, I think, is really the movie that I was trying to make. I think.
Now, it's interesting that he says that, because the director's cut of BVS, it really shows more depth to the story, more exposition of the characters and their behaviors. The studio execs wanted that cut down. Now, I've heard many times over that one of the reasons that studio execs would like films to be on a certain length of a running time is that they can get more showings in, and butts in the seats, so to speak. I'm not totally believing in that, but sometimes it's about just taking creative licensing and controlling the directors, controlling their visions and trying to shape things to a presentation that the studio wants to get behind. When it comes to the comic book source material, if you have a director that can totally take you through the paces of what the comics are truly about, you should always allow him. You should always allow him to be able to do that, because that's where your audience is going to be. Your core audience is going to be those people who say, "Man, that was Batman," or whatever. Like I said earlier, and the actors feel better about their performances because they know that they are taking it from the pages. Visually, Zack is one of the best because being an artist, it's like he can see what he wants to portray, and he gets the art department and those who are in the special effects areas to present what his vision happens to be. It can be a difficult thing, but it could also be a liberating thing, because when the director is imposing himself in that regard, you're bound to get a certain type of a presentation that will be akin to whom your director happens to be. And that's why Zack was very good for the DCEU and what they were trying to do with him starting out. It's amazing what we missed out on, because even the presentation of Darkseid was, that was incredible. The way they had the visuals where it looked like his eyes were aflame and he looked like he stepped out from another world. And that's what we really appreciate as well, when we could see these characters do these things and you have belief behind them, because especially if you read the source material and you can say, man, I can't wait to see him enact XYZ. And that's what we have received from Zack with visuals. We'll move forward a little bit more before we wrap things up, because there'll be a part 2 to this video, but I want to talk about the origins that he had for BVS.
Of BVS. So you're making Man of Steel. You, if I have my timeline correct, you famously announced BVS, that amazing Comic-Con event, when you bring out Harry Lennox. And that's just about a month after Man of Steel comes out. So obviously you were thinking about what you're going to do next in production, in post.
Yes. We were talking about the sequel. We were very happy with what had happened with Man of Steel as far as its success, and obviously starting the franchise, and how we were going to move forward, and that concept, I think, of introducing this character, this sort of new universe, still with homage and with respect to what Chris had done with his Dark Knight trilogy. I think that was kind of our way forward,
Mm-hmm.
And so the landscape was we were very excited. And I think what happened was, when we had this sequence where Superman flies into space and hits that satellite, and you see the Wayne Enterprises logo on it. And frankly, you see the LexCorp logo on the truck, the gas truck that he kicks. So we knew from early days that we would want to build out a universe where all these things could exist in a complete singular mythology that could encapsulate Green Lantern, Dark Side, the whole thing,
Right.
Wonder Woman. And so, and it was kind of like, we had originally thought, like, how are we going to, maybe at the end of this next movie, we could have a scene where Batman just appears, right? Like he gets, like as a teaser, he gets a, I don't know, like a FedEx with a piece of kryptonite in it or something, right? Like that's the end. He opens it and it's like John or some glowing green inside and like, boom, we thought that could be cool. But the problem was, once you say out loud, like, maybe Batman's in the movie, right? It's a difficult thing to put that that toothpaste back in the.
Right. You set aside this beautiful, gorgeous character, one more movie. It's too tempting.
It's really impossible. And so, and with my extreme fondness for The Dark Knight Returns, I found myself going like, look, we can't not do it, right? It's and as a way to introduce or to begin the conversation that there are other heroes in the world, other extraordinary heroes. Bruce Wayne is the world's greatest detective, is the obvious hinge to us finding these other extraordinary characters, right?
Yeah, and that's what I meant about when I said that Bruce Wayne, the way that he was presented, he had a lot going on. There was meaning intelligent wise, his brain, his mind, how it worked. Different from how in Marvel, Robert Downey Jr. played Tony Stark, who was supposedly so intelligent, right? And basically a genius. Wayne is similar in Batman for DC, but with layers and overtones of there being some instability there. So he could get extreme with what he believes in, which is why he was hell-bent in BVS on going after the alien in Cal the way he was. His conversation with Alfred about it, gods falling from the sky. All of that was very impressive, and Zack was able to convey that tremendously. When they chopped the film up for theatrical release, there were certain elements where things kind of flew over people's heads because in this modern time, you almost have to take everyone by the hand through everything step by step. There's no inferences. There's no sense of understanding undertones or even exposition that has visual description as well as rhetorical. It's just a mixed bag of things. But when you see the ultimate cut of BVS, you begin to really understand where Zack was going with this. And so, it's highly recommended. Hard to understand and believe that it has been 10 years already. But this is the kind of thing that we live for. And I have to say that I look forward to seeing Zack and what he was doing with these projects if he is to return to them to complete the stories that he said. And he said that he was interested in not only bringing The Dark Knight Returns to the screen, but also finishing off his Justice League story. We can only hope. But stay tuned for part 2 because I want to take my time with this. And I hope that you all are enjoying this every bit as much as I am, because to hear the man speak so passionately of his projects, this is what we want from the people who present these gems to us. So that'll be it for now. This is Stormy B Man. I want to say shout out to the mighty LDBC, and be tuned in for part 2 as we come back and explore more regarding Zack Snyder and his interview with Josh Horowitz. Peace to everybody out there.